Okay, this is a little demo for working with raw images in Photoshop. This demo assumes that you've shot raw images with your camera and that you've gotten them onto your computer. Here in my photo demo folder, I've got two raw images that I'm going to work with. So the first step is to just choose one, and I'm going to drag it onto the Photoshop icon here. And when you open a raw file, with Photoshop, it opens in the Camera Raw window. You can see up here, Camera Raw. This is the editing environment we're going to work in. There's lots of different things we can do, but the purpose of this demo, we're just going to show you the very basics. So we're going to start over here on the right with the crop menu. First thing I can do is rotate this so it's straight up and down. I can also come in here to the bottom left and say fit in view so I can see the whole thing. Now I want to crop this image because I've got a lot of excess background space here that isn't telling me anything about my sculpture here. I want to choose a preset ratio here, standard ratio, 4 by 5, 5 by 7, 4 by 6 are standard. If you have something long and skinny, you might try a widescreen format here, 16 by 9, but we want to stick to these standard ratios. And this looks sort of square-ish. I could do a 1 by 1 square, but the piece is somewhat vertical, so I think a squarish rectangle, vertical orientation. If I have a piece that's landscape, I can click this icon to rotate the cropping window so it's 4 by 5 horizontal rather than vertical. But with this ratio, now I can resize this and it's going to stay at that 4 by 5 ratio. And I want to just resize this. I can also drag the piece within the rectangle here. I just want to get that nice and cozy. I don't want it too tight to the piece where I'm cutting off the edges. But I want to eliminate any unnecessary background. I also have to decide here how I want this to sit vertically. Do I want to see this point of the pedestal or do I want to cut it off? I think it looks better if I have it visible there. So that looks pretty good cropped. Again, I'm going to fit this in the view so I can see the whole thing. Okay, so that looks pretty well cropped. I'm going to come over here to the Edit menu, again on the right. And again, there's lots of different things here that we can work with, but I just want to show you the basics. One good place to start here is under the Curve menu. So this is a graph, and this graph shows pixels in the image from darkest to lightest. It shows me how many of each brightness value I have, right? You can see I've got a big peak here in my graph. It means I have a lot of pixels sort of in the middle, in the gray area. And that makes sense, right? This whole background area and some of this foreground is all very gray. So I've got lots of gray pixels. I have a few of the darkest pixels, and I have none of the lightest pixels. And what I can do with this curves graph, I can just grab this top and slide it over, keeping it at the top, but slide it over here to the left, just until I hit my the pixels that I do have. And what that's saying is, take the lightest pixels that I have, which are here, and make them as bright as a pixel can be, right? And you can see the effect that has on the image. It really increases that dynamic range. I could do the same thing at this end if I had an image that had some middle value pixels and some brightest pixels, but didn't have any of the dark pixels. I could say, take the pixels, the darkest pixels that I have, and make them as dark as can be, right? That doesn't help my image here, but depending on the graph that you start with, you can bring one end in, the other end in, or both ends in. But often this has a huge effect on the image, makes it look better. Second group of settings we're going to go here is the color. And there's a few things we can do here. The white balance is a setting that we can use here. We take this eyedropper, the white balance eyedropper, and now I can put this eyedropper on any part of the image that I think I want to be pure white, like no color cast. So that could be down here on the pedestal, although some of these areas on this plaster form look even more, have even more of a highlight on them. I could try to capture this sort of lip down here or some area down here. And I can just click, say, okay, if this is pure white, what is everything else going to be? And it can help eliminate a color cast. I can also slide these sliders, and this top slider is sort of a blue to yellow spectrum. And this second slider here is sort of a green to magenta slider. And those sliders change every time I click the eyedropper. Whoop. But we can come over here and slide them directly. And you'll also notice as I slide these sliders, this graph changes. And another way we can try to gauge if we've got a good color balance here is trying to align those curves, right? If I slide this way to the blue, right? The blue and the green and the red start to diverge. So I want to try to adjust these so that those curves are all lined up, to the best of my ability. And when they overlap, well, I've got a decent neutral color cast, right? Whites look white and colors look true. So that's the color settings. And then here in the light settings, I might think about adjusting exposure or shadows or highlights. I can take the shadows and make the shadows darker. There's not a lot of strong shadows in this image, but making those a bit darker. You want to be sort of conservative with these sliders. You don't want to get them all the way to one end or the other, because then things start to get washed out here. But you can make a few adjustments there, and that looks pretty good. So again, just to review: exposure, highlights, shadows, white balance, eyedropper, sliding, temperature, and tint sliders to try to make this graph overlapping red, green, and blue, not having separate curves there. So we have a neutral color cast. And then the curve graph here, sliding the top or the bottom over to adjust the brightness of your pixels. All right, so when I'm happy with that, I'm going to open this. And now it takes me with that file into the regular Photoshop interface. Again, there's a million different things we could do here, but for our purposes, we're just going to try to do what we need to do to get this into the right file format and size for our portfolios. So I'm going to go here to File, Export, Save for Web, because this is a portfolio you're uploading to the web. We want to create a JPEG. I can come over here again so I can see the whole thing, fit in view. So what we want to go here to is do a preset JPEG high. These are different file formats to save it as and different quality settings. So I want a high quality JPEG. And I want to resize my image. And for our purposes, the size you want is 1800 pixels in the longest dimension. So I'm going to go here and find the bigger number here. I'm going to set it to be 800. The smaller number should adjust proportionally. And I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it in the folder that I'm working with here, my photo demo folder, and I'm just going to call it image 1 for now. And there we go. I can close this, and I don't have to save the changes because all the changes I made are actually here in the raw file. Depending on your camera and the type of raw file it generates, the changes you made in the camera raw environment may be embedded in that file, or if you have a camera like me, you might have a raw file and it generates here what's called a sidecar file. Has the same name as the raw file but a different suffix. These, what are called sidecar files, these contain all the changes I made to my raw file. So if I reopen this raw file back in Photoshop, I'll see it looking the way it did when we were done with our edits here. If for some reason I lose that sidecar file, I just put it in the trash. If I come back here to open up that raw file again, my changes are gone because my changes lived in that sidecar file. So if you lose the sidecar file, I just have to come and do those edits again. But if I hunt around and find that sidecar file, now put it back in the same folder with that raw file and open this up. Okay, my changes are back. Whew. So if your camera generates raw files that need sidecars, keep them together. If your raw files don't generate sidecars, you don't have to worry about that. I've got my raw file, my sidecar, and my edited JPEG. This is ready to go up to my portfolio, except I want to rename it. There should be another document that gives you the naming conventions for your class, your project. And so please follow the directions there to rename your files before you upload them. And I would just then repeat the process here with my next file. Open it in RAW, do the cropping, do some editing here on the curve and the color. Try to get those curves to overlap. And maybe some darkening of the shadows. Open, export, save for web, JPEG high, 1800 pixels in the longest dimension. Save it as image 2 for now. Close it. Don't save it. Here's one file ready for portfolio, 2 files ready for my portfolio. Just rename them, upload them, and you're done. All right, that's it for the demo. Thanks for watching.